We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Master your mind, or it will master you. You do not become free by controlling other people. You become free by controlling your response. That is the difference between a man who reacts and a man who leads his own mind. A covert narcissist is dangerous not because they are always loud, but because they are subtle. They do not always enter with open aggression. Sometimes they enter with charm. Sometimes with victimhood. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with just enough warmth to keep you attached and just enough distance to keep you confused. That is the real threat. Confusion. Because when a man loses clarity, he starts negotiating with disrespect. He starts explaining himself to people who never intended to understand him. He starts chasing peace from the very person who keeps stealing it. Stoicism gives you another way. It teaches that you do not need to control the entire world. You only need to govern yourself. Epictetus said we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. That is not passive wisdom, that is power. If this message hits you, comment today, I choose my response. Not because a comment alone changes your life, but because public commitment strengthens private discipline. It tells your brain that you are done living on autopilot. A covert narcissist often hides behind a mask of sensitivity, intelligence, pain, or even moral superiority. They may act misunderstood. They may make themselves look like the wounded one in every story. They may make you feel guilty for questioning them. And if you are a decent man, that can hook you fast, because decent men want to understand. They want to help. They want to believe there is a human explanation behind the behavior. But not every explanation deserves trust. Some people use your empathy as a leash. That is why the Stoics mattered so much. They understood that the biggest battle is not out there, it is in here. It is the battle for your attention, your interpretation, your restraint, and your inner order. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." That means your mind is either becoming a fortress or becoming a prison, and the difference is discipline. When a man begins to see this clearly, he stops believing that peace is something other people are supposed to give him. He stops waiting for the perfect apology. He stops expecting the manipulator to suddenly become honest because he explained himself one more time. He stops thinking that emotional exhaustion is the price of being a good man. It is not. A good man is not a man with no boundaries. A good man is a man who knows where his boundaries begin, and he defends them with calm precision. That is the real work, and in modern life, this matters in more places than romance. It matters with a girlfriend who keeps you in emotional limbo. It matters with a wife who uses guilt instead of directness. It matters with a boss who needs your insecurity to preserve his authority. It matters with a brother who always plays the victim whenever the family talks about accountability. It matters with a friend who only calls when they need something. It matters anywhere a person tries to control access to you through confusion. The mind hates uncertainty. That is part of why these dynamics are so powerful. The brain wants resolution. It wants a clear answer. It wants to reduce tension. So when someone is inconsistent, your nervous system starts working overtime. You replay conversations. You reread messages. You try to decode tone. You imagine alternate meanings. You ask yourself if you misunderstood something. You keep reaching for closure because your brain wants relief. That is exactly where you must become stronger. Not by forcing closure, by tolerating uncertainty long enough to see the pattern clearly. That is how discipline begins. Rule 1. Call things by their name. The first rule is to stop hiding reality behind soft language. Do not call manipulation a misunderstanding when it is clearly manipulation. Do not call disrespect a bad moment when it is a repeated pattern. Do not call gaslighting a communication issue when someone is actively trying to make you doubt your own memory. Do not call breadcrumbing busy behavior when somebody keeps feeding you just enough attention to keep you attached. Do not call passive aggression being tired when the pattern is obviously aimed at control. A covert narcissist survives in fog. They need vagueness. They need uncertainty. They need you to keep asking yourself, am I overreacting? Because the longer you stay uncertain, the longer they stay in control. Stoicism begins with precision. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That is exactly how covert manipulation works. It creates a false reality inside your head. It makes you imagine that you are too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, too difficult. It makes you doubt your own perception before you ever get the chance to judge the facts. So call the behavior by its real name. If it is guilt-tripping, call it guilt-tripping. If it is breadcrumbing, call it breadcrumbing. If it is passive aggression, call it passive aggression. If it is emotional manipulation, call it emotional manipulation. If it is silent punishment, call it silent punishment. If it is gaslighting, call it gaslighting. That is not cruelty, that is clarity. And clarity is what protects a man from being slowly broken by confusion. Think about how this shows up in daily life. A woman says she is not ready for anything serious, but she still wants all your attention, all your energy, all your availability. A man says he values honesty, but every time you ask a direct question, he gives you a half answer and then makes you feel like the problem for asking. A colleague says he respects you, but he constantly takes credit for your work in front of others. A family member says they care, but every conversation becomes a guilt session designed to make you carry what is not yours. If you cannot name the behavior, you cannot respond to it properly. And if you cannot respond to it properly, you become easy to steer. There is a reason why naming is powerful, even in psychology. When you label an experience clearly, the brain begins to organize it. The chaos becomes structure. The emotional fog starts to thin. The story stops being random and starts becoming visible. That matters because a visible pattern can be addressed. An invisible pattern keeps repeating. A man who can say, "This is manipulation," is already less vulnerable than the man who keeps saying, "I just feel off, but I don't know why." And pause and reflect. What are you still tolerating because you have not called it what it really is? "Today I choose my response" is not just a comment. It is a line in the sand. It is the moment you stop being a passenger in your own life. Rule 2. Stay on the subject. Manipulative people love distraction. The moment you bring up the real issue, they suddenly talk about your tone, your timing, your past, your attitude, your emotions, anything except the actual behavior. That is not a conversation. That is an escape route. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man should concentrate every minute like a Roman on doing what is in front of him with precision and seriousness. That principle applies here. Stay on the subject. Do not let them pull you into side battles that have nothing to do with the real issue. If the issue is dishonesty, stay on dishonesty. If the issue is disrespect, stay on disrespect. If the issue is inconsistency, stay on inconsistency. If the issue is emotional games, stay on emotional games. You do not have to answer every diversion they throw at you. A weak man follows every side road because he thinks proving himself will save the situation. A disciplined man understands that attention is expensive. He spends it carefully. He does not let manipulative people dictate the structure of the conversation. And in modern relationships, this is a huge problem. A partner may dodge accountability by turning everything into your insecurity. A co-worker may avoid responsibility by making the meeting about your delivery. A family member may shift the topic the moment the truth gets too close. Do not follow the smoke. Return to the fire. There is a special kind of mental fatigue that comes from arguing with someone who never actually intends to address the issue. You walk away drained, not because the topic was hard, but because the person kept changing the battlefield. That is intentional in many cases. The goal is not resolution. The goal is confusion, and confusion creates leverage. If your partner knows, you will eventually forget the original issue because you became exhausted defending your tone. They learn that they can avoid accountability by changing the subject long enough. If your boss knows you will stop pushing back once the discussion becomes uncomfortable, they learn that they can sidestep responsibility with social pressure. If your friend knows you will always yield when they play offended, they learn that emotional pressure works on you. This is where Stoic discipline becomes practical. You can say, "We are not discussing my tone right now. We are discussing what happened." You can say, "That is a separate issue. Stay with the point." You can say, "I am not moving away from the original question." You can say, "We can address that later. Right now we are dealing with this." Simple, controlled, direct. The man who stays on the subject becomes hard to manipulate because he refuses to let the conversation be shaped by emotional sabotage. Pause and reflect. Are you arguing about the real problem or just the distractions around it? Rule 3. Don't take responsibility for their emotions. This rule is where many good men get trapped. They feel responsible for everyone's mood. If she is upset, they fix it. If he is angry, they absorb it. If someone withdraws, they panic. If someone is disappointed, they immediately start apologizing. But Stoicism draws a line. Your judgments belong to you. Your choices belong to you. Your actions belong to you. Their emotions belong to them. Epictetus taught that some things are in our control and some are not. That distinction is one of the most powerful ideas in all of philosophy because it cuts directly through emotional chaos. A covert narcissist often weaponizes emotion. They make you feel guilty for having standards. They punish you with silence. They use sadness, frustration, or outrage to make you feel like you must rescue them. Do not do it. You can care without carrying. You can listen without surrendering your center. You can understand without becoming responsible for the consequences of someone else's immaturity. That distinction matters because the brain is wired to avoid social discomfort. When someone is cold, upset, or accusatory, your nervous system wants to repair the connection fast. That is normal, but normal is not always wise. The moment you stop over-functioning for someone else's emotions, you start reclaiming your own mind. Think about the man who keeps trying to make a relationship work by regulating the other person's feelings. He walks on eggshells. He edits every message. He checks the room before he speaks. He becomes a manager of emotional weather instead of a participant in reality. That is not strength, that is captivity. And it often begins with good intentions. A decent man sees someone upset and wants to help. That is natural. But a manipulative person learns quickly that your compassion can be turned into compliance. They discover that if they stay wounded long enough, you will abandon your own boundaries just to restore peace. That is the trap. The Stoic response is not to become indifferent to human emotion. It is to stop confusing empathy with ownership. You can care about someone's pain without making it your mission to regulate it for them. You can acknowledge their frustration without surrendering your principles. You can be humane without becoming available for emotional blackmail. That shift changes everything. Pause and reflect. Where are you still trying to fix emotions you did not create? Rule 4. Disengage when attacked. Not every attack deserves a response. Not every insult deserves a defense. Not every accusation deserves a speech. Not every provocation deserves your energy. A covert narcissist often escalates when they feel they are losing control. They push harder, they twist harder, they provoke harder, because they know that if they can get you emotional, they can pull you back into the game. Silence breaks that game. Marcus Aurelius said we have power over our mind, not outside events. That truth becomes real when you stop treating every attack like an emergency. Sometimes the strongest move is not a clever reply. Sometimes it is a clean boundary. Sometimes it is ending the conversation. Sometimes it is walking away before the emotional trap closes. That is not weakness, that is control. And control is what manipulative people hate most, because they expect a reaction, they expect panic, they expect over-explaining, they expect you to fight for your dignity in a way that makes you look unstable. But when you remain calm and disengage, you remove the fuel. A fire cannot spread forever if you stop feeding it. There is also a neurological reason this matters. When you react immediately, you are often operating from the limbic system, the part of the brain that responds fast, protects status, and avoids pain. But when you pause, you give your prefrontal cortex room to come back online. That is the part of the brain associated with judgment, self-control, and strategic thinking. In other words, a pause gives your higher mind a chance to retake the wheel. That is why silence is not passive. Silence is a tool of regulation. You do not need to answer every text instantly. You do not need to defend yourself in the middle of a heated exchange. You do not need to prove your innocence to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Sometimes the cleanest answer is no answer. Sometimes the cleanest answer is distance. Sometimes the cleanest answer is saying, I'm not continuing this while it is being used against me. And yes, this applies in dating too. If someone keeps cutting you down in subtle ways, then acts shocked when you pull back, that is not a sign you should explain more. That is a sign you should become more selective. If someone only knows how to feel powerful when you are losing your cool, then your calm is the very thing they cannot control. Pause and reflect. Can you walk away before your emotions get hijacked? Rule 5. Seek truth over sentiment. This is where many men lose themselves. They want the relationship to feel right, so they ignore what is actually happening. They want the apology to mean something, so they ignore the pattern. They want the person to be better, so they excuse the behavior. But truth is not sentiment. Truth is evidence. Epictetus warned that if you want to improve, you must be willing to appear foolish in matters that do not matter. In other words, stop protecting the fantasy at the expense of reality. Look at the facts. Look at the pattern. Look at the consistency. Look at the behavior over time. A person can say they care and still keep you in emotional limbo. A person can say they respect you and still treat you like an option. A person can say they love you and still use you for attention, stability, or validation. That is why so many men stay stuck. Their mind keeps choosing what they hoped was true over what keeps proving itself false. The brain wants certainty, it wants closure, it wants to reduce discomfort. That is why men often stay too long in situations that are clearly unhealthy. The nervous system would rather cling to a familiar lie than endure the discomfort of letting go. But wisdom requires something harder. It requires seeing what is there, not what you wish was there. A man once told himself his partner was just going through a hard season. Months passed. The mixed signals remained. The coldness remained. The emotional punishment remained. He kept telling himself that if he were more patient, the warmth would return. But what he was really doing was negotiating with hope while ignoring the evidence. That is how many men waste years. A similar pattern shows up at work. A manager praises your effort privately, but undermines you publicly. You keep hoping the next conversation will fix it. A friend says he values you, but only contacts you when he needs favors. You keep hoping the loyalty will appear later. A family member apologizes, but repeats the same pattern, and you keep confusing remorse with change. Truth over sentiment is hard because sentiment feels humane. It feels loyal. It feels open-hearted. But if sentiment keeps you blind, It is no longer kindness. It is self-betrayal. Pause and reflect. Are you in love with their behavior or with the version of them you hoped would exist? Rule 6. Expose deception calmly. When you realize you've been manipulated, do not turn your pain into a performance. Do not explode just to feel powerful. Do not scream just to feel right. Do not give them the satisfaction of making the interaction about your emotional collapse. Expose the deception calmly. That kind of calm is devastating to manipulation because it removes the drama they need to survive. Epictetus advised keeping calm and not becoming angry with them. That is not softness, that is discipline. It means you are no longer playing their game. Say the truth simply. That is not accurate. That is not what happened. I do not agree with that version. That is not how I remember it. I am not accepting that framing. Short, clear, direct. Seneca said truth is not harmed by time. It is discovered. That is why calm exposure is so effective. Lies need confusion. Truth needs patience. And once a lie is exposed without emotional theatrics, it loses a lot of its power. This matters in dating, in work, in family, in every place where manipulation hides behind tone and performance. Because the moment you become the emotional storm, they get to stay the victim. But when you stay calm, the actual pattern is revealed. Imagine a relationship where every disagreement becomes a test of your patience. Imagine a co-worker who lies in a meeting, then stares at you hoping you will react and look unstable. Imagine a family member who rewrites the past every time accountability appears. In all of those scenarios, the goal is the same: make you emotional enough to lose the truth. But truth does not need volume. Truth needs steadiness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is calmly say, "I remember it differently," and then stop talking. No drama, no begging, no emotional collapse, just a clear refusal to surrender reality. That is a man who has started to recover his center. Pause and reflect. Can you tell the truth without turning it into a war? Rule 7. Remember your worth and hold boundaries. This is the rule that changes everything. A covert narcissist often tries to wear down your self-respect slowly. They give enough attention to keep you hopeful, enough warmth to keep you attached, enough distance to make you chase, enough ambiguity to keep you doubting yourself. If you do not have a strong center, you start mistaking tolerance for love. But your worth is not something someone grants you. It is something you protect. Seneca said it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. That line cuts deep because it exposes what keeps men trapped. They keep craving validation from people who have no intention of giving it honestly, and every time you chase approval from the wrong person, you train yourself to become smaller. Boundaries end that pattern. A boundary says, "This is where I end and you begin. This is what I accept. This is what I will not tolerate. This is the price of access to me." That is not aggression. That is self-respect. And if someone leaves because you finally became clear, that does not mean you lost. It means their access mattered more to them than your dignity. That tells you everything. A man with boundaries becomes harder to manipulate because he no longer confuses kindness with surrender. He no longer confuses patience with self-betrayal. He no longer confuses being a good man with being endlessly available for mistreatment. That is real strength. Think of the man who keeps accepting inconsistent treatment because he fears being alone. He tells himself that any connection is better than none. But over time, that mindset destroys him. It teaches him that being chosen badly is better than not being chosen at all. That is a lie. Solitude can heal. Self-betrayal cannot. Think of the man who keeps over-explaining himself to a partner who never listens. He thinks if he finds the perfect words, the person will finally understand. But the problem is not his language. The problem is their refusal to respect what they already know. Think of the man who stays in a friendship where every interaction leaves him drained. He keeps calling it loyalty when it is really fear of distance. A boundary would change everything there too. A strong boundary is not coldness. It is the refusal to let your life be organized around other people's dysfunction. Pause and reflect. What standard have you been lowering just to keep the wrong person close? A man who learns these rules starts moving differently. He speaks with more precision. He reacts with more control. He explains less and observes more. He stops chasing respect and starts living in a way that makes respect unavoidable. That is what invisible growth looks like. It does not need applause. It does not need explanation. It simply changes the way a man carries himself. And that is why it is so powerful. Because the more disciplined you become, the less the world can pull you off center. The more you control your mind, the less other people can use your emotions against you. The more you see clearly, the less likely you are to confuse charm with character. That is the real transformation. Not becoming cold, becoming clear, not becoming numb, becoming unshakable. And once a man reaches that level, he stops being easy to manipulate. He stops being easy to shame. He stops being easy to provoke. He becomes steady, quiet, hard to move. That is the power of Stoicism when it becomes action. And it is not just theory. It is daily practice. It is the moment you do not send the reactive text. It is the moment you wait before replying. It is the moment you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who benefits from doubting it. It is the moment you redirect your frustration into work, training, reading, creation, or silence. It is the moment you decide that your emotional stability matters more than their opinion. That is how silent growth happens, not by shouting your evolution, by becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to shout. If this video gave you clarity, comment. Today I choose my response. Say it with intention. Say it like a man who is done handing his piece to the wrong people. Like this video, if it spoke to you, share it with a man who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more applied Stoicism, neuroscience, and real personal development that actually changes the way a man lives. Master your mind, or it will master you. This is the Stoic equilibrium. Reason as a way of life, virtue as strength, discipline as the path.